My name is Justice Elena Rodriguez. I'm 45 years old, and I never thought my former law school classmates would mock me for being a failed lawyer at our 20-year reunion. But when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court stood up and called me Your Honor, their laughter died forever. Let me take you back to the beginning of the story, because what happened at my law school reunion was the culmination of 20 years of deliberate choices that my former classmates completely misunderstood. I'm Justice Elena Rodriguez, and 3 months ago, I was confirmed as the youngest Associate Justice in the history of the United States Supreme Court. But for the past 5 years, I've been living under an assumed name in a small town in Montana, working as a public defender while secretly serving on a federal judicial task force that required complete anonymity. My cover story was simple. Elena Martinez, the idealistic lawyer who burned out from big city law and moved to rural Montana to find herself while helping indigent clients. I rented a modest apartment above a diner, drove a 15-year-old pickup truck, and spent my days in a cramped public defender's office representing people who couldn't afford private attorneys. What my law school classmates didn't know was that my career decline was actually the most important work of my life. I had been secretly appointed to investigate judicial corruption in federal courts across the Western District, an assignment that required me to maintain a cover identity while gathering evidence that would eventually reform the entire federal judiciary system. The irony was perfect. While my former classmates were making millions at prestigious law firms, I was living on a public defender's salary and building the case that would make me the most influential legal mind of my generation. My Harvard Law School class of 2003 was legendary for producing corporate lawyers, federal judges, and Supreme Court clerks. We were the ambitious, Type A personalities who graduated summa cum laude and immediately joined white-shoe law firms with starting salaries in the 6 figures. My study group from law school had all become exactly what you'd expect. Marcus Webb was now a senior partner at a top Manhattan firm. Sarah Chen had made partner at a prestigious D.C. practice. David Thompson was a federal prosecutor who'd made his name prosecuting high-profile cases, and Jennifer Walsh was general counsel for a Fortune 500 company. Meanwhile, according to their knowledge, Elena Rodriguez had thrown away her Harvard law degree to become a small-town public defender in rural Montana. They viewed my career path as either a mental breakdown or a complete lack of ambition. For 5 years, I endured their pitying emails and condescending phone calls. "Elena, are you sure you're okay out there?" Sarah would ask during our rare conversations. "I mean, public defense work is noble, but with your credentials, you could be doing so much more." Marcus was even more direct. "You're wasting your Harvard education defending meth dealers and drunk drivers. Come back to civilization and let me get you a real job." The truth was more complicated than they could imagine. My small-town public defense work had given me access to federal court proceedings across Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. I'd documented patterns of corruption, witnessed judicial misconduct, and built relationships with court personnel who trusted the harmless public defender enough to share information they'd never tell a federal investigator. My work had led to the resignation of 3 federal judges, the reform of sentencing guidelines across the Western District, and a complete overhaul of the federal public defender system. But I couldn't tell anyone about it without compromising ongoing investigations. So when the invitation to our 20-year Harvard Law reunion arrived, I almost didn't go. The event was being held at a luxury resort in Napa Valley, the kind of ostentatious display that my former classmates loved and that would be completely out of character for my public defender persona. But then I received a call that changed everything. "Justice Rodriguez," came the familiar voice of Chief Justice William Sterling. "I have some news that I think you'll find interesting." 3 days before the reunion, the president had announced my nomination to fill the vacant seat on the Supreme Court. The confirmation process had been expedited due to the urgent need for a 9th justice, and the Senate had confirmed me unanimously after reviewing my extensive judicial reform work. "The swearing-in ceremony is scheduled for next Monday," the Chief Justice continued. "But I was wondering if you'd like me to attend your law school reunion this weekend. I think it might be educational for your former classmates." The plan was perfect. I would attend the reunion as Elena Martinez, the failed public defender, and let my classmates have their moment of superiority before the truth was revealed. I arrived at the Napa Valley Resort wearing exactly what they expected: a simple dress from Target, sensible shoes, and the slightly overwhelmed expression of someone who clearly couldn't afford to be there. The reunion cocktail party was everything I remembered about Harvard Law social events: expensive suits, designer dresses, and conversations that were thinly veiled competitions about career success and financial achievement. Marcus spotted me first and immediately called the others over. "Elena, my God, look at you," he said with the kind of fake enthusiasm that barely masked his condescension. "How's the public service work going?" "It's going well," I replied, playing my role perfectly. "I'm still in Montana, still helping people who need legal representation." Sarah exchanged a meaningful glance with Jennifer. "That's so admirable," she said in the tone people use when they mean pathetic, but are too polite to say it. "Are you still living in that little apartment above the diner?" David asked, and I could see him mentally calculating how far I'd fallen from our shared starting point. "It's affordable," I said simply, "and it's close to the courthouse." The pity in their eyes was almost palpable. Here was their brilliant classmate, the woman who had graduated in the top 5% of their Harvard Law class, reduced to small-town public defense work and living above a diner. As the evening progressed, their comments became more pointed and less subtle. "Elena, seriously," Marcus said during dinner, "don't you ever regret throwing away your potential? I mean, with your grades, you could have been making partner at any firm in the country by now. Instead, you're defending criminals in Montana," Jennifer added. "I just don't understand the appeal." Sarah leaned forward with fake concern. "Are you having financial problems? Because if you need help getting back on your feet, I might be able to find you something entry-level at my firm." The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I maintained my cover perfectly. "I appreciate the concern," I said quietly, "but I'm exactly where I need to be." That's when David laughed, a cruel sound that carried across the dining room. "Look how far she's fallen," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "From Harvard Law Review to defending drunk drivers in the middle of nowhere. It's almost tragic." The group erupted in uncomfortable laughter, drawing stares from other reunion attendees. I could see people at nearby tables pointing and whispering, clearly recognizing me as the subject of ridicule. "Poor Elena," Marcus continued, warming to his audience. "She could have been sitting on a federal bench by now or running a major law firm. Instead, she's living like a college student in rural Montana." Jennifer nodded sagely. "It just goes to show that talent alone isn't enough. You need ambition, drive, the willingness to succeed in the real world. Some people just can't handle the pressure of actual legal practice," Sarah added. "They retreat to small-town work where the stakes are lower and the standards are more flexible." I felt every eye in the dining room on me as my former classmates continued their public humiliation. People were taking out their phones, probably posting about the failed Harvard Law graduate who had become their entertainment for the evening. That's when I heard a familiar voice from the entrance to the dining room. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the clear, authoritative voice that I'd heard countless times in Supreme Court proceedings. "I apologize for the interruption." The entire dining room went silent as Chief Justice William Sterling walked through the crowd, his presence immediately commanding absolute attention. Every lawyer in the room recognized him instantly, the most powerful judicial figure in the United States. He walked directly to our table, his eyes fixed on me with a slight smile. "Your Honor," he said clearly, addressing me with the formal title reserved for judges, "I hope I'm not interrupting your evening, but I wanted to personally congratulate you on your confirmation." The silence in the dining room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop as 200 Harvard Law graduates tried to process what they were witnessing. Marcus, Sarah, David, and Jennifer stared at me in complete shock as the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court continued speaking. "Justice Rodriguez," he said, using my real name for the first time in 5 years, "your work on judicial reform has been extraordinary. The federal court system is stronger because of your sacrifices." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every stare in the room. "Thank you, Chief Justice Sterling," I replied professionally. It's been an honor to serve. The dining room erupted in chaos. People were pulling out phones, frantically Googling my name, trying to understand how the woman they'd just watched being mocked for her failed career was being addressed as Justice by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Marcus looked like he was about to faint. Elena. Justice. What's happening? Chief Justice Sterling smiled as he addressed my former classmates. I believe you know Justice Elena Rodriguez, our newest Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Her confirmation was announced 3 days ago. Sarah's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. For the past 5 years, the Chief Justice continued, Justice Rodriguez has been working undercover as part of a federal judicial reform initiative. Her public defender, work in Montana, was cover for investigating corruption in federal courts across the Western District. David's face had gone completely white. Undercover? You mean? I mean that while you all assumed her career had failed, she was actually building the case that reformed our entire federal judiciary system, the Chief Justice explained. Her work led to the resignation of corrupt judges, the overhaul of sentencing guidelines, and the implementation of new ethical standards that will protect the integrity of federal courts for generations. Jennifer found her voice first, though it came out as a whisper. You're on the Supreme Court? As of Monday morning, yes, I replied calmly. I'll be sworn in as Associate Justice at a ceremony attended by the President, congressional leadership, and the full Supreme Court. The Chief Justice wasn't finished with his explanation. Justice Rodriguez's undercover work required her to maintain complete anonymity. She couldn't tell anyone, not friends, not family, not former classmates, about her real assignment. She sacrificed her reputation, her social connections, and her public standing to serve her country. He looked directly at Marcus, who had been leading the ridicule just minutes earlier. So when you mocked her for throwing away her potential, she was actually fulfilling the most important potential of any lawyer, the opportunity to strengthen our justice system itself. The room remained in stunned silence as the implications sank in. The woman they'd been pitying and mocking was about to become one of the 9 most powerful judicial figures in American history. The irony, Chief Justice Sterling added with a slight smile, is that while you all were building impressive careers in corporate law, Justice Rodriguez was building a legacy that will outlast all of us. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from the White House Social Secretary. Justice Rodriguez, the President would like to schedule a photo opportunity for your swearing-in ceremony. Are you available for a brief call this evening? I showed the text to my former classmates, whose expressions had progressed from shock to something approaching existential crisis. Elena, Sarah stammered, we had no idea. We thought. You thought I had failed, I said gently. And I let you think that, because my work required absolute secrecy. But your assumptions said more about your values than about my career. Marcus tried to recover. We were we were concerned about you. No, Marcus, I interrupted. You were using me as an example of failure to make yourselves feel better about your own choices. You spent the evening publicly humiliating someone you thought was beneath you. The Chief Justice nodded approvingly. Justice Rodriguez understood something that many lawyers never learn, that the highest calling of our profession isn't making money or gaining prestige. It's serving justice itself. As word spread through the dining room about my identity, people began approaching our table. Senior partners from major law firms, federal judges, and prominent attorneys all wanted to congratulate the new Supreme Court justice they'd just witnessed being mocked by her own classmates. The contrast was stark and embarrassing for my former study group. The woman they'd been ridiculing was now being treated with the reverence reserved for one of the most important legal minds in the country. Later that evening, as the reunion wound down, Marcus approached me privately. Elena. Justice Rodriguez. I owe you an apology, he said, clearly struggling with the magnitude of his error. What we said tonight was cruel and wrong. You said what you believed, Marcus, I replied. You assumed that success looks like a corner office and a 7-figure salary. But sometimes success looks like a cramped public defender's office and a pickup truck, if that's what the work requires. Sarah joined us, tears in her eyes. How do we? How do we come back from this? We humiliated you in front of everyone. You humiliated yourselves, I said simply. I was just doing my job. Over the following weeks, as news of my Supreme Court appointment spread, the story of the reunion became legendary in legal circles. The video someone had taken of my former classmates mocking the failed lawyer went viral, becoming a cautionary tale about assumptions and the true meaning of success. Marcus, Sarah, David, and Jennifer all faced professional embarrassment as their public ridicule of a Supreme Court justice became a case study in legal ethics classes across the country. But the most satisfying part wasn't their embarrassment. It was knowing that my 5 years of sacrifice, the modest apartment, the old pickup truck, the condescending comments from former friends, had been worth it. On Monday morning, I stood in the Supreme Court chamber as Chief Justice Sterling administered the oath of office. The president was there, along with congressional leadership and my new colleagues on the court. As I raised my right hand and swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, I thought about my former classmates watching the ceremony on television, finally understanding what my failed career had actually accomplished. I had traded temporary comfort and social approval for the chance to shape American jurisprudence for decades to come. While they were making partner at law firms, I was preparing to write opinions that would become part of constitutional history. The woman they had mocked for falling so far was now sitting on the highest court in the land, with a lifetime appointment to serve justice at its most fundamental level. 6 months later, when I authored my first Supreme Court majority opinion, a landmark decision on judicial ethics that directly referenced the reform work I had done undercover in Montana, I received a congratulatory note from my law school class. It was signed by all 4 members of my former study group, with a simple message: we should have known that Elena Rodriguez would never settle for ordinary success. They were right. I had never settled for ordinary success. I had chosen extraordinary service, even when it looked like failure to people who couldn't see beyond appearances. Sometimes the highest honor looks like the greatest fall, until the Chief Justice stands up and reminds everyone what real success actually means.